a seed is planted and a flower grows. Then the flower dies, but the fruit continues to grow. Water is given, the light shines upon it, and eventually a fruit is there. The dog watches over and guards it. The human is getting ready to pluck it. But then, in between dog and human, we see the monkey. And the monkey, the challenger, the trickster, they take away the fruit before the human can pluck it. And that makes the human think. Then we come with the skywalker. The human looks up at the sky. Why was my food taken away from right under my nose? The human realizes the need to walk both the earth and the sky. But what does it mean? What does it all mean? We get to learn about the wizard, the gardener. What is it like to be a gardener? Sometimes we need to have some overview like an eagle, and sometimes we need to stand with our feet on the ground like a warrior, protecting our territory and taking what we need and sharing what we don't need. That's the balance we have to find with nature, as described through every character of this wave. The sea to warrior wave. Now this is a reflection. We are looking back at the second half of August, because I haven't been giving you your energy update for a while. Sorry about that. It's been a little strange. Things are happening within me, and I'm really trying to figure out where to go and how to work with astrology. And I haven't gotten to doing this. It's been feeling weird, and I'm gonna talk about that more. But first things first, we're gonna look back. We're gonna look back and just catch up on what we've been missing before I get to talking about where we are right now. But if you are watching this when I intend to upload it, which is tomorrow morning, it'll be the 9th of September, Moon 13. And so we will be looking back, because Moon is about remembering. And so we get to remember, what were you doing the second half of August? I try to, of course, give you these podcast readings while it's still happening. But this time we get to reflect, and it's actually really beautiful to look back with astrology. Because when we can look back, we already know what has happened, and it's much easier to recognize how these energies were playing when we've already have a view of what has happened. But it requires good memory. I don't know if you keep a diary or you're just really good at remembering, but what was going on in your life between the 15th of August and the 27th of August? What was happening? What were you going through? I'm going to talk a little bit about what I was going through. And that is exactly what I was just describing in this wave, which is the birds were eating my food. Yeah. I was really working on the garden, and we had a day where we walked into the garden, and all of a sudden this berry tree, this berry bush that had been full of berries, was all of a sudden completely empty. It seemed like it had happened overnight. And that same night, the apple tree, the very small apple tree that had about 15 apples, there were 2 left. It was not a fun thing to wake up to. And the apple tree was probably a moose, which is always fun. It's just, yeah, we didn't even get to see the moose, but they did get all the apples, and yeah, it's okay. You know, they can have apples. We have enough apples. It's okay. But that was a bit of a surprise. And I actually heard someone, something, some creature in the garden the night before, and I was like, oh, is there a human? No, there's no human. There's a moose. Probably. And it wasn't until the next day when my mother said, all the apples are gone. I was like, huh, I did think I heard what sounded like a moose. Indeed it was. However, mooses don't eat so many berries. And when they do, they'll like take the whole branch, and you'll notice it was not a moose that took the berries. So the funny thing is, in the same night, both the apple tree and the berry bush were suddenly eaten. And this must have happened from 2 different creatures. Now, we had never seen the birds take all the berries from a bush in one single day. We really didn't think that's how birds did things. So, the birds would take some fruit. Yeah, great. I remember the first year we were plucking 1,000 apples from the floor. It was wonderful. And the bees were eating it, the butterflies were eating it, the snails were eating it, the birds were eating it, And we were getting so many pears regardless because, there was just so much. And it was wonderful to feel how we were all sharing in the abundance. But now what happens when it's not so abundant? Now we get a different story. And I guess this is something we see in the world all the time, right? If there's abundance, everybody's peaceful. Everything's fine. But when there is a shortage, when there is a lack, or when we perceive there to be a lack, all of a sudden we want to protect our little thing, and this is mine, and I gotta have enough, and yeah, well, that's what this wave is about. So we thought a human must have come into the garden and stolen our fruit. And we really didn't like that thought. We really didn't want to think that way, but we just couldn't imagine that it could have been the birds. It was the birds. But we really thought it couldn't have been the birds. And we really didn't like to think that a human would come into our garden to take our berries. But yeah, it had to be the case. And later we noticed that apparently, yes, birds do grab a lot of berries in a very short time frame. When it's time, they suddenly go and eat all the berries. And that's what they do. We saw it later with other trees. And yeah, it's I've really had to adjust to the behavior of the birds this year. The first year, I remember we had cherries. No, it was the second year, actually. The second summer. We had so many cherries. And I always thought, well, birds take fruit before it's ripe, before the humans think it's ripe. And the birds, they can already eat it. But what happened with the cherries is they didn't take them. We took lots of cherries from the tree. And by the time they were overripe and we had taken so many cherries, that's when they started eating them. And I thought, well, that's weird, but convenient. And there were still plenty of cherries for the birds to eat as well. So that worked out fine. We had lots of cherries, and then when it was really late in the season, the birds started eating the cherries. I thought, well, how wonderful. Thank you, birds. I'm glad this is how it works. And then came this summer. And what happened the cherries are the first fruit we get here. And what happened was, way before it was ripe, the birds started eating all the cherries. And so by the time we got to them, there were no cherries left. By the time they were starting to get ripe, they were already eaten. So we didn't get any cherries this year. So that was the first thing that happened. That was a while ago. And okay, well, not so many cherries. Oh well, I'm not, I like cherries, but I'm not super fond of them. At least we have all the other berries, right? And so we started plucking the other berries, and that worked out fine. And we've gotten plenty of these berries as well. But at some point, the birds were like, we're taking them all. So, yeah, that was a surprise. And, yeah. I mean, we don't, put nets over our berry trees yet. And it's really been something we started thinking about for the first time, really. Especially when after they pluck those berries, I have this other smaller type of berry. I think it's called, we call it crossberry, but that's not the English word. I don't remember. Gooseberry, yes. And we don't have as much of them, and I really like them. And the first 2 years, I was just, plucking those, and there was no competition. And this year, I remembered how I plucked them a bit early, and they were a little bit sour, so I was like, yeah, let's let them ripen. It's not like anybody else eats these anyways. And then I plucked some of them, maybe 10 of them, and I was just leaving the rest to ripe. And 2 days later, I was sitting on my balcony. I was pretty tired, and I was looking into the garden, and I saw the bird, and it was eating the gooseberries. And I sat there, and I thought about, okay, I could go downstairs right now and go pluck those gooseberries. I'm really tired. And who am I to take it away from the bird? I've already had a bunch of them, but I left most of them hanging. And so I thought about that, and I looked at that bird as he ate the gooseberries, and I was like, I want gooseberries too, but, they're feeding their children. Yeah, they're feeding their children. How important is it to me? Do I really need those gooseberries? And I tried to communicate with the bird. And I got the feeling the bird was like, if you want berries, you're just going to have to come down right now and go pluck them, And if you don't, then I'm taking them. That's how it works in the wild. When you find something, you take it, you eat the whole thing, and then you move on because you don't know if it'll be there when you come back. That's something I was learning. And so I considered going downstairs and going into the garden. But, I thought, yeah, maybe it's okay. And maybe the bird is willing to leave some berries for me. So the next morning I did go looking to see, and the whole bush was empty. In a single day, that bird had eaten 30 berries, and yeah, it was gone. And I looked at him eating them all. I sat there and let it happen. And it felt, double. I felt a little good about it and a little not so good about it. But this is something I've really been working with in this wave. Yeah. What do I really need and what do I not need? And where do I want to set boundaries and claim my space and say, this is mine? And where can I actually say, you know what? I don't really need this. It's nice. I could have it. It's pleasant, but Is it really my thing? Is it really the thing that I need? And so this is what this wave is asking us. What is really your thing? What is really the stuff that you want, that you need? And what is the things that you're maybe taking in, that you are consuming, that you are going after, but that is actually not so important to you? That is actually not really your thing. You don't really need it. And where are you maybe letting everybody else walk all over you? Where are you maybe letting everybody else take the things that you really want? And can you blame them if you're not going after it? You know? This is what the bird was saying, right? If you're not going to pluck them, if you're not going to eat them, well then I'll eat them. Yeah. So if we can evaluate what is really important to us, what are our priorities, what do we really want to go after? Once we understand our priorities, then we can understand what's not our priorities. And then we can go after that which is important and leave behind that which is not. And this, of course, is a relevant thing to do all the time, even if we were particularly reminded of this in the second half of August. We get to keep working with that. We get to keep evaluating what is not a priority and what is a priority. And that which is a priority, let's go after it. Let's say, yeah, this is what I want, this is what I need, I'm gonna go and take it. You get to, you know. If you are truly aligned with what you really need, with what is really your thing, it is there for you. It is waiting for you. It is waiting for you to come after it. Because there is abundance in this world. If only we all take what we really need and leave the rest for someone else. You know, this is the beautiful thing about living your purpose, finding your purpose and living it. As you figure out what you come here to do, as you step into what is really yours to do, others can look at you and think, oh, that's really your thing, isn't it? Well, then maybe that was just a thing that I was vaguely interested in, but not nearly as much as you are. So maybe I can drop that. You're already doing that. You're taking care of that job being done. So I can focus on my list of 10 to 12 things that I still think might be my purpose, and at least I can cross one more off the list as I figure out what is mine. You know, so as you step more into what is really your thing to do, you're helping others do the same. As you choose your focus, as you figure out who you are, through reflections, other people can see who they are. That's the beauty. This wave is about goal warrior, about becoming this real unique individual. The yellow warrior is the wise elder, the one who has lived for a while and who has learned a lot, who has the wisdom and who knows really their own path and who walks their own path. They have seen many directions and they know which one is theirs. And the talent of this wave is the mirror. Because like I just mentioned, when you live your thing, you are providing a beautiful mirror to others. You are showing others what is possible. You are showing others that it is possible to be a focused, wise person who knows who they are and who lives their beautiful purpose. And even as you just step into one thing that you love, you are showing others how possible it is to love something so greatly. And you are inspiring others to go after what they love so much. And so, what I noticed, to bring it back to the metaphor of the birds, is that while they took those gooseberries, and I also was too late to the other gooseberry bush, but now there's all these blackberries, and they don't eat that much of the blackberries. And now there's all these pears and apples, and sure, they pick some bits and pieces of all of these fruits, but there is so much, and we have so much food, and we can have so much food that we can store, and there's plenty. It's all good. They really like the gooseberries. That's great. They got the gooseberries. We should plant more gooseberries. They got the cherries. That's great. But we have so many pears now. And I'm loving the pears. So it's okay. And so you gotta pick, warrior worries about choosing your battles wisely. The warrior fights for justice. The warrior stands up for themselves, stands up for the people in their community, stands up for everybody's right to live in their own way. But the warrior also knows which battle to fight and when to just walk away. Because it's not about fighting. It's about justice. It's about wisdom. It's about protecting what needs to be protected, but also knowing when to simply maintain peace, when to simply get out of the way. And therefore, it is important to know yourself, to know what is important to you and what is not. We get to keep reflecting on that. And we have the wizard that is teaching us to receive and pass on. That is what the wizard does. We take what we need so that we can provide what we don't need. And the warrior sets those boundaries around their own territory to protect their own. What is not present in this wave is the yellow sun, is the unity consciousness. Because this wave is a bit more about me and mine, about standing for who you are, about figuring out who you are and who you're here to protect, who belongs with you. And so this is about choosing who you're here with and standing for you and your people, your family, your way of life. Now, the wise warrior knows that everybody has a right to live in their own way. And so we all get to do that in our own way. But understanding the beautiful balance of nature is understanding that within that, every creature has their own territory. Every creature works on their own survival. And that can create a beautiful balance if we all work on our own survival. If we all take that seriously, if we all take what we really need and leave what we don't need. The warrior says, yes, you get to live in your own way. But here, there's a whole bunch of people who all want to live in this particular way with each other. And so if you want something completely different, then maybe you should go do that somewhere else along with other people who want to live in that particular way. So the warrior stands up for their way of life, the way of life of their people, their family, their community. To say, yeah, these are our morals. These are the ways that we find important here. And so if you want to live here, then it is important that you go along with that. If you don't want to, that's great, but then maybe it would really work better if you would live somewhere else. Maybe it really would be better if you're on the other side of the fence. And what sometimes goes wrong in the human world is that some people have a fence and other people don't, right? Someone controls the fence instead of the fence being a mutual thing. Between two neighbors, there might be a fence, and both neighbors might like it that way. But it gets tricky when on one side of the fence there's no good stuff, and on the other side of the fence there's the stuff that everybody wants. That's when it gets complicated. And then we have to wonder, why is it that on that side of the fence there's all the good stuff? Was it perhaps all stolen and taken to behind their own walls like 100 years ago before we supposedly abolished slavery? And that, okay, sorry, I'm not gonna get political, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So in the human world, it's complex. It makes sense to say, right, that if you want to live in a certain way, then it would work well to do that together with others who want to live in that way. And if you want to live in a very different way, it would work to do that somewhere else with people who want that. It makes some sense, and yet this is sensitive because this way of thinking is segregation, is cultures living separately from each other, and we have seen that go terribly wrong. In fact, we're watching it right now, isn't it? If you watch the news, you're seeing examples of where this goes wrong, or where this is very difficult, especially when we try to artificially create that situation. But we also have to wonder, why do we have a bunch of fenced off areas, and in each of these areas are so many different cultures, so many different people who want to live in such different ways, all together behind the same fence, all together in the same community? And does it even feel like a community? Or is it just a bunch of houses together where people live, but they barely know their neighbors, and they have very little with them in common? That doesn't feel very good, does it? And maybe you live in a very multicultural neighborhood, and you guys get along great. I just said you guys, and some people might not like that I said that. I think multiculturalism is complex. But let's get back to the astrology, What we can see here is that, as far as I can interpret, is that what this wave, this process is saying is that sometimes we need to set some boundaries. That sometimes we need to stand for this way. And here we want to do that way. And over there, someone else can do their way, and they should protect their boundaries too. It isn't simple. And this is not the only story. There are 20 different stories in life, and it is important that each of these stories, these waves, these different processes in the calendar, that they're all played, that all these voices are heard. This is why we're all born in one of these waves, so that all these different views on life can be expressed. And many people can have very different views on life being born in the same wave, but there are stories inside of these waves that provide different perspectives on life. And it is the balance we find throughout time, a balance of ups and downs, of change and transformation, that we find because we move through these energies, because we move through time. This wave is learning about time. The wizard, timelessness. Because we move through these cycles, Just like we have 2 weeks in a wave, we have also got cycles where we spend 10 years in a wave, where we spend 260 years in a wave, where we go through the Tzolk'in calendar in 5,200 years instead of 260 days, as we do here in the day energy in these podcasts. There's also the 5,000-year calendar that ended in 2012. And so society goes through these waves, goes through these motions, goes through these phases in which we learn and grow and develop in a certain way. And then we move on to another phase again. Oh, there's so much. This astrology is so interesting. I love this calendar. There is so much more that I want to talk about, that I want to discover, and that I want to share with you about this beautiful calendar. That's something I've been thinking about. And more on that is coming, because there are so many calendars. There's not just this one. And I really want to look into that more. But yeah, more on that in the next one. And I hope you had a great time listening to this and spending some time with me. I hope you had a great time in the second half of August with your experience of that wave. If you want to share something about that, I'd love to hear what you experienced in that time. And if you find reflecting very difficult because you don't remember it all, then I will be doing the next one very soon. And the next one after that will actually be happening while we're still in the wave. I'll be getting back to doing this on time. So, with that said, I love you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. And I'll see you soon. Bye. When to simply stay behind your own walls, to simply be within your own space and not trespass against others.